the Solo Coach Podcast.
Hello, Nikki.
Hi, David.
Welcome to the Solo Coach Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to talk to you.
I'm really excited for you to be here today. So, for everyone listening, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the podcast. And today I have the pleasure of interviewing Nicky Lloyd Graeme, who's the stress specialist, is her business, and she's a stress management consultant. So, I met Nicky on a CRS editorial network in Roundhay Park, which is in Leeds, and we immediately hit it off talking about the importance of stress management and the catastrophic impact on our well-being when stress gets out of control. As two individuals who have both experienced burnout, there's actually a lot of crossover in our journeys and our reasons for doing what we do in our businesses now. So Nicky went temporarily blind with stress in her old career and has taken her learnings and experience from her darkest moments into what she now helps others to avoid. So Nicky, I'd love to start by asking you, can you tell us more about what it is that you do as a stress management consultant?
Sure, yeah. Nowadays, how it looks is I quite often get called into organizations. There's two reasons that I go into organizations. One, which is probably the most common, if I'm honest, is they're panicking, and it's usually, they've flagged up a problem. They've maybe got maybe one or two individuals who have been signed off with stress or have complained about being stressed, and they're like, we need to help them. Or they've maybe noticed that there's a lot of absence in general on the wider organization. So they call me and it's like, what we're doing wrong, what's going on, what can we do, etc. So my role is to go into either organizations or to talk to individual people. And basically, first and foremost, I have to listen and try and unearth what's going on. So I have lots of conversations around first, actually, primarily what is stress. Do they know what stress is? Do they know what triggers it? Do they know what exacerbates it? A lot of people don't. I'd say, I mean, it's a self-imposed percentage, but basically, anecdotally, in my work, I would say a good probably 70-80% of people don't actually know what stress is. They know what the word, they know when someone says they're stressed, they kind of know, oh, that means that people are struggling, but they don't know at its core what stress is. So that plays a big role. So part of my role when I go into organizations is first to let them know this is what stress is. And actually, when you understand it, these are the kind of things that as an organization you can do, as individuals you can do. You have a duty of care to yourself and to your employees to make sure that you're doing everything you can to not avoid stress, because that's impossible, but to help build resilience and help your employees recognize that they can speak out and they can challenge and they can take action as well. It's quite empowering. It's about understanding how much agency organizations and individuals have in the management of stress. I think a lot of people think it's impossible to deal with, and that's really not the case.
Thanks, Nicky. So, when I'm sure everyone listening, myself included, have their own sort of definition of what stress is. And I know it's that we were talking about this last week. It's one of those words that's kicked around as common as the word busy. I'm busy, I'm stressed. We're all saying it all day long. Some people maybe wear it as a badge of honor. I'm busy and stressed, therefore I'm successful. And it's part and parcel. It comes with the territory, right? But I'm curious as to what your definition of stress is.
So my definition of stress is probably very different to what most people would expect. So my initial definition is it's your internal superhero. And in fact, I have little, when I'm doing presentations, I even have a little brain with in a Superman pose with a little cape. Because actually stress does help us every single day, whether you care to believe it or not, it does. It helps us wake up in the morning. It helps us deal with all kinds of things every single day. But actually, the problem that we're having these days, and the reason why I guess there's a need for the work that I do, is that people don't realize we're overusing it, we're using it incorrectly. One of my favorite quotes is stressed is just dessert spelt backwards. I think I shared that with you when we spoke on the walk. And we look at it the wrong way. We by association, we just assume stress is a bad thing. It isn't. It's the way we use it that can often be a bad thing. It's the way that we overuse it. It's the way that we almost give into it. And when I say give in, that's probably not the right word, but we allow ourselves to be a victim of it rather than recognizing, actually, if my stress levels are high, I need to take action right now. If stress levels are high in a business, we need to do something in that business to take action. We need to look at systems, policies, procedures, culture, all those kind of things. We need to look at those and see what needs to be adjusted, because stress levels are high and there's no need for them to be. But to me, it's your internal superhero. It's the emergency alarm that goes off in your brain to say, okay, we need to power up now. It gives you kind of a superpower to do whatever it is you need to do.
When you were talking there, Nicky, and you said, with an organisation, we need to look at, I think you said systems, processes, procedures, and that sounded quite stressful from a point of, where on earth do you start?
Usually the easiest place to start, like I say, asking questions, some kind of audit. It usually gives an idea. Things like stress surveys, pulse surveys, engagement surveys, looking at data, looking at, absence levels. The Health and Safety Executive, HSE, every single year do a study of UK organisations to ascertain, what's going on from a health and safety perspective. And part of that is they also talk about stress. And they identify every single year which industries struggle with that. They identify what level of absence is caused by stress, anxiety, and depression. And it accounts for over, I think, in the whole time that I've been looking at the studies, I think they've been doing these surveys since about 2017, since I've been looking at them. And every single time, about 50%, give or take a few percentage here and there, of all absence is down to stress and potentially anxiety and low mood, which are often interlinked. And it's always the same three industries as well that are at the top, but there are lots of other industries underneath that struggle with stress, and obviously they're still struggling with 50% absence. So I don't know, it just seems like logic to me for an organization. Find out what's going on in your organization, start with the surveys, start having an open environment where you can talk about these things. Because again, I've walked into organizations where, oh my God, they're very cynical. It's like, oh, stress is the new bad back, or, oh, if they're stressed, they almost see it as a weakness. And actually it's not. It's just your body doing what it's supposed to do, but it's having to do it too much. And why is that? And it might not be anything to do with work. It might be stuff going on at home. It might be, related to health. There's all kinds of potential reasons behind it. But, if you're running an organization with people involved, you have to start with your people. You have to look at them and think, right, what's going on?
It sounds very similar to a coaching approach that I'm used to, which always typically starts with, so where are we now? Where do we want to get to, and how are we going to get there, and how can we break that down? And I'm curious if clearly where we don't want to be is completely stressed out and dripping with stress and all of the problems that are associated with that, but you're saying it's not realistic and perhaps not feasible to have a completely stress-free environment or completely stress-free life, and not beneficial indeed. So where are we trying to get to?
We're trying to get to, and it is an overused word, but it's the kind of best word there is at the moment. We talk about resilience, although I quite often use the term mental agility. You want to get to a point where people are agile. So basically, where people can switch on their stress response easily, but also switch it off easily as well. Because the more you use it, when you get into this chronic state, it's almost like it stays switched on, and that's what causes the problem. So you want a mentally agile organization that can flex. So their mindset can flex, their ability to do things. And it is like building a muscle. It is that kind of resilience element, so that no matter what hits them, because things will hit them, let's face it, we never know what the government are going to be doing. We never know what, economy is going to be doing. Even just, what's happening at home, health issues can hit, an accident can happen. So many things can impact that are out of our control. So many things can impact your stress levels. But we need to be able to, it's not about reducing them, because you can't. It's about, okay, how do we tool up? How do we, make sure that our teams and ourselves are as prepared and as capable as possible to, when stuff hits, yeah, it might take us a moment, we might kind of just get winded a bit, but then we can get back on track and think, okay, what do I need to do to work my way through this? How can I function? What's the best approach? So that you're not in that panic survival state, because when you're in that panic survival state, ironically, you don't have access to your prefrontal cortex. You don't have access to the parts of your brain that can help you the most. So therefore, you don't have access to the parts of the brain that maybe do the best work, or are most productive, or most efficient. So it makes sense, both, economically from a business perspective, but also from a human perspective. It makes sense to learn how to navigate your way through and understand your own stress response and what you need to do in order to feel better. But equally, it's a two-pronged approach. In an organization, if your organization is one that is, it beats everyone over the head, do this, get this done, and it's a very psychologically unsafe environment. Therefore, people are feeling stressed because of leadership or conditions or whatever it might be. You also can, you can attach the problem, or start and attack the problem from that side and say, well, okay, we can also influence things by making changes here and making sure that we have. And I mean, like you said, it's a coaching approach. I am a coach by this is where I started, and I started just doing coaching before I got into the consultancy thing. And that is my approach all the time. It's like, okay, you're here, what can we do? It's forward focused. We don't want to be looking at, well, we've always done things this way, or this is the past. It's very much forward focused. But how are you going to get the best out of your people, and what do you need to do that?
Thanks, Nicky. I thought this was going to be a good conversation. It's even better than I'd hoped. But you reminded me of an old IT analogy. I used to run a whole host of servers, so a group of servers, and we always used to run them. Stick with me. We always used to run them 70 to 80% of their full capacity, right? So
Yeah.
they would always be running in kind of the amber zone, not the green zone, but not also running on the red line. They'd be so that they could accommodate for a spike in demand. So if suddenly overnight one of our products on our website went crazy, took the world by, the servers could go and they could handle it, not probably all day long, and it uses a lot of power, costs us a lot of money, but they could handle it. It was like the potential to scale and cope with that spike in demand was engineered into the solution. And I always used to think, I wonder if this is what we need to be doing with our people and our teams in some way, and not running people at 100%, but running them at kind of 60-70% maybe, so that then if we do have a massive incident, we've all got some extra to give left there, in the tank.
Yeah. So I quite often use, there's a model called the corporate athlete, and I use athletes as an example. So take and my knowledge of athletes is quite limited, so I'm going to go to probably an older one that everyone recognizes. Take Usain Bolt. He's a sprinter. He takes 10 seconds to work. Whenever he goes out on the track, he's expected to work 100% for 10 seconds. That's it. Yeah, they expect him to go out there, right? You need to give 110, probably 50%, whatever, but just for 10 seconds. But that doesn't mean, that doesn't mean when he's practicing or when he's whatever else, he has to give 110%. He doesn't. He actually, he will have, as part of his program to get him so that when it's needed, he can work 110%. He will have rest, he'll have nutrition, he'll have other types of exercise and other things he can do that will support his ability to go and hit that race for 10 seconds and be the fastest that he can be and the fastest on the track. But if you go into an organization, a lot of the time they're expecting you to run at 100% for 8 hours a day. And that's not feasible. And then they're surprised when people go into burnout. But actually, what about, having that flex in that? Yes, there will be times, of course, there will be times when actually, we need you, we need you to function at 100%. But how are you supporting them the rest of the time? Like you said, is it, do we call it a percentage? Do we say working at I kind of don't like to call it working at 60-70% because that suggests that they're lacking in something. It's just
Mm,
that they're preparing, they're focusing, they're doing all the other stuff that needs doing. You and I both run our own business. We don't, when we're in that room with a client, especially one-to-one, we give 100%. We have to because it's that client. But we don't do that for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. We can't. It's impossible. We'd actually be doing our clients a disservice if we were to do that. Organizations need to learn that. We are doing other things to support it, whether it's, we're meeting up on walks like me and you did, or, whether we're eating well, or whether we're, taking in extra content to learn more things so that we can serve our clients even better. All those things contribute. And I wouldn't actually say that means I'm working at a less percentage. What it means is I'm working in a way that is not heightening my stress response.
mm,
And I'm actually giving my body the rest and recuperation and the necessary tools and strategies and techniques that it needs so that, like you say, when I need to hit the ground running, boy, can I hit the ground running.
You were really striking a chord with me there, Nikki, when you're talking about the sports analogy, because I'm 99% certain that people who train to run a marathon, I believe what they'll do is train up to about 18
Yeah,
miles
they never do the whole length. Yeah, they
and
never
not and
do
then
the
wait
whole.
until the day to give it 110% and run
Exactly.
the
Yeah.
full 26.2.
Yeah, exactly that. But yet, in a work environment, how many times, I mean, obviously, like we've shared before, you left the corporate world, I left the corporate world. I think we both had managers that were like expecting us to show up and give everything. And if we didn't, but then we were incapable and we were wrong and we were chastised for it or punished in some way. There were consequences. And actually, that's not how you get the best out of people.
Mm,
And if you've got longevity in mind when you've got running an organization, you need to figure out how to get the best out of your people.
mm,
And it doesn't mean pushing them day in, day out, or even implying that they have these really high expectations. People say, well, I don't push. And I'm like, yeah, but let's take a really easy example. If you've got a boss that is emailing you at 10, 11 o'clock at night and never takes a lunch break and is always in early in the morning and never leaves the office until 7 o'clock, that's kind of sending the message to the team, this is how hard we need to be working.
mm,
If you make comments in, if you have a staff meeting and you're making comments like, oh, need to applaud such and such because they've been working so hard, they've been doing 12 16-hour days and they'll be doing this, but you don't acknowledge maybe the person who has to go home because they've got children's responsibilities. They've still done just as good work. They've just they've done it in a shorter time span, or they've done it in the hours that they're expected to work, and it's not because they can't do what the other person's done. It's just as in capability wise, it's just practically they can't stay that late. But yet we only these if you're an organization that then just acknowledges the people who flog themselves to death, then that's, again, culturally, that's the message you're sending all your staff. And if people aren't prepared to do that, they're going to feel like failures, and it again leads to a psychologically unsafe environment.
mm. Absolutely. There's so many stories and examples running through my head as you speak of people I've seen and sometimes teams I've not even been in, but what I've observed and dynamics changing as one leader comes in and another leader leaves and so many I'd love to draw on, but equally conscious of time, I really, really want to ask you about what has led you to have you always been great at stress management and
No.
what planting the seed there of what led you to choosing this path.
Okay, so this kind of ties in with the introduction that you gave. So back in 2010, I was I landed a job, what I thought was my dream job, working for a management consultancy, but it was a family-run organization, and I could work predominantly from home, but I did need to move down to just outside London, so I could go into London 1 or 2 days a week. But obviously working around my daughter, that worked really well. They seemed very forward thinking. They seemed very much into kind of personal development, which is something I've always been into. And they seemed to talk the talk. It seemed really good. After about, I don't know, 18 months, 2 years, I think I was kind of still in the honeymoon bubble and ignoring a lot of things. But then suddenly it started to dawn on me, actually, this is not what, this is not the kind of organization that I was led to believe it was. It started, or it seemed to start quite subtly, because there was bullying in the workplace, but initially it wasn't aimed at me. But then those people ultimately left, and then so it started coming towards me. There was expectations around because I work from home, it was almost like, well, you should be on 24/7, to the point where I'd get emails at midnight and say, oh, I need this by 9 a.m. meeting in the morning. And obviously, if I was asleep at midnight and I didn't get, I'd wake up and check emails before I took my daughter to school, and it'd be mad panic. There was a lot of things that were going on that were really unprofessional. And the irony was, we had clients where I was going in and designing and delivering programs all about leadership, all about, self-empowerment and development, and all positive stuff, positive psychology based stuff, mindset driven stuff. But it just, it wasn't happening in that regard. It kind of crept up on me in terms of, I started to not feel great, getting lots of headaches, had lots of stomach problems. But still just thought, I didn't know what stress was. I genuinely didn't know what it was at that point. But I knew that I was struggling. My daughter had made a few comments about, oh, you're always angry, you're always annoyed, Mum. You're always, I wasn't I've always been very calm. I've never been someone that's got angry or anything. And I was starting to get quite irritable. And I think it probably showed up more because I've never been that kind of individual. And obviously I was always ill, so I didn't have energy to do things, and it was just me and my daughter, so it was a bit of a struggle. And she then one weekend, she was asked to go and have a sleepover at a friend's. So and one of my friends who lived on the South Coast offered, says, well, you need a break, come and he put me up in a hotel, and he took me out for a nice meal, and he was like, you need to, I'll just spoil you for a bit. I was like, great, this is lovely. We turned up at the hotel. It was in the New Forest. It was, the restaurant was in the New Forest. It was beautiful. I was like, oh, wow, this is amazing. We just ordered our food. And it was like my body suddenly thought, oh, we're not stressing about anything right now. Boom. And I went blind. I couldn't see. I started shaking. Absolutely terrified me. And I asked my friend, like, something's not right. My food hadn't even arrived, which was annoying because it was going to be really nice. I said, you need to take me to hospital, I can't see. So he took me to the hospital, and I mean, I started to get a bit of my eyesight back. It wasn't back fully, but on the journey I started to get a bit of it back. And then when we arrived at the hospital, I tried to get out of the car. My legs buckled underneath me, so he got them to come out. They wheeled me in. They did loads of tests, and it transpired it was chronic stress. And what I'd experienced apparently was a stress migraine. So my eyesight did come back. They did loads of other tests. I was in there for a few hours, I think 5 or 6 hours. And they checked everything else. So, I didn't have a heart attack, hadn't had any of those things. It was they just said it's a stress migraine. What's going on in your life? So, told them about work. I had some financial issues, single parent, the usual thing. And they were like, yeah, you need to take some time off work, go back home, because I was about 80 miles away from home at this point. And they said, when you get back home, you need to check in with your GP and probably need to take some time off. You need to go and tell your GP about this. So in my infinite wisdom, I stayed that night. As I said, my friend put me up in a hotel. So luckily I didn't have to drive that night. I did drive home the next day. I did feel better. I went to the doctor, and the doctor said, yeah, we want to sign you off for 4 weeks. And I'm like, yeah, I can't do that. I was so scared because I was in this toxic environment that I didn't even take the time off that the doctor was telling me that I needed to take off, because I was convinced they wouldn't pay me. And that's kind of the threats that they quite often used to give me. And so I didn't take the time off. And so obviously I was getting, it was almost like a ticking time bomb waiting for the next thing to happen. And then ironically, it was my daughter who just turned around one day and she's like, Mummy, I really don't like you. You're horrible. You don't, you're not nice anymore. You're not fun anymore. And she was 10 at the time. And that was like a proper stab in the heart. I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? Because me and my daughter are insanely close. So I realized I had to take some action. Luckily, I had a friend at the time who was going through another difficult journey. And one of my things, if I'm struggling, one of the things that helps me is to help others, ironically. So I started helping him, but realized I needed to do the things that I was trying to get him to do or trying to help him with. We attended a like one of these transformational events, a bit Tony Robbins-esque kind of events. And so I attended one of them, and part of it was you had to make a promise of something that you're going to change. So I said, right, I'm leaving my wristband on until I hand my notice in. But I was living down south, my family were up north. I was like, you know, I can't afford to live down south without a wage coming in. So I'm not advocating this as a strategy, but I decided to go. I went to the bank and asked for a hefty bank loan, as much as I could get on the wages that I was earning, and I got that to tide me over, and then I quit because I needed that space. I mean, I had been looking for jobs up until then, but I you know, nothing had come up, and I was just like, no, I just need to leave because this is unhealthy. Literally, the minute I handed my notice in, that ironically, the boss started crying at first, and then he got angry. But it was like this big weight shifted. My stomach went back to feeling okay. I stopped getting the headaches. You know, I was fun. I was laughing again, all that kind of stuff. And I left a month later. And to this day, best thing I ever did. Best thing I ever did. But I still had to heal. So I then started looking into things. I explored what stress was. Unfortunately, the NHS is very under-resourced, so I didn't get much access to. I think I had a little bit of CBT, but I'd already done some training in CBT at that point from out of curiosity. It was not to do anything with. I've come from an NLP and a CBT background, and counselling. Actually, I've done all three. So I was like, yeah, I'm not really learning anything from this. So I just went on my own little journey. I went back into NLP, which helped me a lot. And I went right up to train the trainer. I did lots of little courses on what stress is and mental health and all that kind of stuff. And basically, I just went from there. And the thing about me is, whenever I learn something, I always want to then train it. If I look back, you know, I was a fitness instructor when I was younger because I used to like going to the gym. So then I learned how to be a fitness instructor, personal trainer. You know, when I went into businesses initially, I learned all about how to use, like, you know, Microsoft Excel and PowerPoint and whatever else. I ended up training those. So, you know, it's the pattern that I've always gone on. So then when I started learning all about stress and mental health, the logical thing for me is, right, people need to know about this stuff. People need to know, because I had no idea that just how much in control or how much agency I had in managing my own mental health. I was very much the victim. And it's hard for me to say that because people don't admit it, but I was absolutely in victim mode, and I was, woe is me, the world is against me, it's not my fault. But actually, you know, through going through this journey, I realized, no, I can make some changes here. I can do something about this. You know, even if people are being horrible to me or the situations are not, but I can make a change. And so, yeah, that's how I got into this. And I started one-to-one coaching, and I started doing little bits of training. And it's just, it started initially, I trained as a coach, and I was like, okay, right, well, I'll just do coaching and a bit of training. But then in 2017, I specifically specified or niche down into stress management, because prior to that it was just general stuff, but stress was always in there. And so I launched the Stress Specialist in 2017, and I've been going ever since.
Wow. Thank you, Nicky. Beautifully told, just like when we first met, even better this time. I wondered if I could take you back to just before the meal in the restaurant.
Yes.
And were there any, I'm curious to know, were there any warning signs that were going on up and before the moment happened where you lost your eyesight temporarily, thank goodness? Were there any other warning signs in your body that something wasn't quite right leading up to that event?
Absolutely, but I didn't know that they were warning signs. So I developed really quite severe IBS, which is not a condition. It's called irritable bowel syndrome. But basically, what IBS is a host of kind of digestive symptoms that they can't attribute to anything else. So they just put it under the label of IBS. Sometimes it's food related, majority of the time it is stress related. So I was struggling with that. I was struggling with migraines quite a lot and bad headaches. As I say, irritability. I had dry skin. I mean, on reflection now, there was lots of things. My memory was impacted. My ability to think straight, brain fog was a big problem. Fatigue. I wasn't sleeping. I mean, there was a period of time, thankfully, it didn't last very long, where I was self-medicating with alcohol, and not loads, but I'd have 1 or 2 glasses of wine a night when my daughter went to bed, because that was the only, because alcohol is a depressant, so it kind of gives you a break from the stress. So it's understandable that people reach for that. I didn't know that at the time. But you know, I was having that 1 or 2 glasses a night, but it was like I needed to have it. Luckily, I think that kind of only lasted about 6 months. I quickly kicked that, you know, once I realized that this wasn't doing me any favors, I managed to stop that, and that was fine. But they, you know, and I was withdrawing from things, and I'd had a couple of panic attacks, but not none that they were panic attacks. So one of the things that I do socially is I'm a salsa dancer. I've been a salsa dancer for 26 years, and I've taught that as well. So I've always been very comfortable going to salsa events and just rocking up and always knowing people. All of a sudden I'd get to an event and I couldn't get out of the car. I was like paralyzed until my brain said, we'll go home. And then all of a sudden that like released the paralysis, but I couldn't get into the venue. That never happened to me before. Salsa was always my safe space. You know, so there was lots of different things. I became quite, I developed social anxiety. I couldn't go into it. Like, you know, obviously we met networking. I would not have been able to do that at that point. I just wanted to kind of stay home with my daughter, and we'd go out and do things together, but I wouldn't go to anything social or anything like that. So there were lots of symptoms. I just didn't know that they were symptoms of stress. Even things like dry eyes, and you know, I was having to use Optrex every day. I didn't realize that that was a symptom of stress. Lots of things.
Thanks, Nikki. We connected over this, and for context, where for people listening, when we had coffee, I was discussing how I'd been through quite a stressful time a couple of years ago, forcing myself in a situation that didn't feel right. I was, you know, doing a lot of masking, and as a result, I was suffering with things like lower backache that I just couldn't get rid of. I was going through different chairs, different cars, even, and I just couldn't shift that lower backache. I got digestive problems. I'll spare you the details. You know, headaches, and then I developed RSI and had to have a load of modifications for the computer. But just my whole body was tired, achy, sort of worn out, like someone had put, you know, 3 or 4 decades on my body. It's kind of over a period of several months. And I just remember thinking, what the hell is going on here? And my question is, if someone's listening and thinking, oh my goodness, I've got a few of these signs, maybe not all of them, but maybe a few of them, and I haven't been feeling right for a while, and I'm getting a bit of backache, or my eyes are just perpetually dry as well, you know, what would you recommend as like just a place to start?
So the one thing that I talk to my clients about is the first thing I'll do is I'll explain what stress is, and it's this, like, I refer to it as this emergency button in the brain, a bit like a smoke alarm. As soon as we perceive a threat, it goes off. It doesn't wait to find out if it is actually a fire. Obviously, at first, it's just we perceive it. That's the key word. And it goes off, and that releases these hormones, which work great in an emergency. But if you're all releasing them into your system the whole time, that's when it starts to cause problems, particularly cortisol. So I kind of say to them, right, okay, well, what we need to do is find ways to get rid of the cortisol. Basically, the reason that you're feeling as rubbish as you are is you need to get rid of the cortisol. So identify, step one, don't focus on the stuff that's causing you stress. Focus on the things that make you feel good. As cliche as that sounds, you know, I mean, I can show you actually, because we're on here. I have, oh no, that's not that one. I need to rewrite it, but I have a feel good mind map. It's my healthy habits, and it's very overused. As you can see, it's falling apart. But I have a whole list of things on here of all the stuff that helps me. And there's all kinds of things. It might be, you know, looking at my environment. Does it smell nice? Have I got candles or incense going? You know, what music am I listening to? What TV programs am I watching? Because let's be honest, like I say, your stress response is about perceiving a threat. If you're into horrors, I'm not disputing that you might like them, but your brain is interpreting that as a threat because it's an automatic response. It doesn't check in with logic before it fires it off. If you're into thrillers and horrors, or you're listening to the news, or you're constantly scrolling social media and all that kind of stuff, you're inadvertently triggering your stress response. So have a list of things, and I would say write it down, because when you're stressed, you won't think of doing these things. And then when you start to feel like, recognize your early warning signs, and then when you start to feel a little bit, oh, you know, for me, the best way to identify if you need to do something is if you find yourself saying, I need a bath, I need 5 minutes, I need to walk away, I need a drink, I need chocolate, whatever it is. If you find yourself saying, I need, fill in the blank there, chances are that's your body saying, too much cortisol, get rid of it. And we get rid of cortisol either by breathing, sweating, crying, or introducing happy hormones. That drops it down. So breathing, obviously we can do breathing exercises, or we can do activity and exercise that will help us breathe heavier and get rid of it that way. Having a good cry, actually quite a good thing to do. They put those tears under the microscope, they'd be full of cortisol. You know, making sure that we hydrate well enough so that we can sweat and we can get rid of and urinate it out as well. But we need to hydrate in order to do that. A lot of the time people don't, you know, the majority of people are dehydrated. We don't drink enough. So doing those things, but then, okay, what are the things? How do I introduce happy hormones? So you've got your dopamines, your serotonin, your oxytocin, and even your endorphins. So anything to do with that. So whether it's hanging out with people that you enjoy doing, whether it's putting your favorite song on and having a dance around the kitchen, you know, there's no right or wrong. Whether it's having a good cup of tea, you know, just whatever it might be. Obviously, we're trying to avoid adding further stress, so I wouldn't necessarily recommend alcohol or anything like that. But, you know, try and think of, well, what puts a smile on my face? Oh, God, I haven't listened to that song in ages. Let me listen to that song. Or, you know, let me go for a walk in nature, or let me, you know, whatever it is you need to do. Journaling, getting stuff out, feeling, you know, ticking things off a to-do list. There's your dopamine hit right there. There's so many different things that we can do. They don't have to be big, huge things. Obviously, booking a holiday is great, but how many times can we do that? You know, you might not even have time to have an hour's bath. So just think, what are the little things that I can do that I can drip feed in throughout any given day so that I can drop my cortisol levels. But the key is you've got to do it consciously. You know, you've got to intentionally choose and don't feel guilty, because that's a big thing what people do. If they've got a to-do list, or, you know, if they've got lots of things that are stressing them out, when they're not dealing with it, they feel guilty. The irony is, there's a really famous quote, I think it's Buddha or Gandhi or someone like that, where it's like, oh, if I find myself saying, I haven't got time to meditate today, then I will meditate for 2 hours instead of 1. Because that's basically my brain saying, oh, I haven't got time, I'm stressed. And in order to be effective and efficient and more productive, you actually need to calm the nervous system down first. And so, you know, doing the things, it might feel counterintuitive, but doing the things that make you feel better will mean that then when you are having to deal with the stuff that is causing you stress, you're actually dealing with it in a much more effective way.
But what if someone says, but Nicky, that all sounds so good and so wonderful, and oh, taking a bath with candles and maybe having a nice big glass of water and hydrating, and you know, that just sounds marvelous, and listening to my favorite song and having maybe some chocolate or some fruit. But what when I go into work and I go back into that environment, I walk through the front doors and I am triggered. I'm absolutely triggered. The red mist descends and everything I see just frustrates me. Things I've been working on and tidying are upside down again. People that said they'd do these things, they're not doing them. My inbox is overflowing and I'm just ready to scream. Where's my candle bath there, Nicky?
Breathing exercises. Well, it's your nervous system that's reacting. And you, when you are triggered, it's your nervous system that's gone into survival mode. So it will not check in with logic and it will react. It's, if you've ever read the chimp paradox, it's the chimp that's kind of reacting there. You know, and you will not, you know, you're not going to deal with things in that state. And getting angry is not going to help other people, and stress is contagious as well. So actually that's going to filter out to your team, which is going to make it worse. You have to start with the body. You have to start physically. So whether it's finding, like I said, breathing exercises, I mean, I don't think many people are up for this, but go and have a playlist of videos that make you laugh, and go and watch those, and go sit in the cubicle of the toilets for 5 minutes and just watch silly videos that make you laugh. Anything to calm your nervous system down, because the signals going, so the vagus nerve is pretty much like this, the thing that switches whether or not your nervous system is on or off, your sympathetic or your parasympathetic. And it's 80% of those messages go from the body to the brain, only 20% go from the brain to the body. So you can't think your way out of a stress response. You've got to do it physically first. So going to take 5 minutes outside and taking a deep, we say it all the time, don't they? Count to 10, take a deep breath. That stems from people recognizing we need to, you know, de-stress in the moment. And it can take 30 seconds to switch off your nervous system once you get practiced at it. There's breathing exercises such as the physiological sigh, where you take it's a double inhale and then a slow breath out. And that literally gets rid of, we lose 70% of our waste through our breath. That includes cortisol. Learning how to breathe properly, as daft as that may sound, is vital. It's so important to managing your system. And then you see, once you're in a calmer, you know, once your nervous system is not so hyped and you're not so, you know, kind of ramped up, you can then start to look at all these people that are triggering you and think, okay, what's the best approach here? What do I need to do? And you can start to engage. And then that, I mean, that kind of leads me on to another branch of the consultancy that I do. It's then encouraging people. I train people how to coach. I train people how to have curious conversations, rather than just kind of, you need to do this, or, you know, why haven't you done that? We start talking about how communication and the language that we use. If you're sat there going, oh, I'm so stressed, I am so furious, you know what? Your brain is going, press this button, press this button, press this button. But if you're sat there saying, yeah, that's a bit of a dilemma, I'm not, you know, I'm not happy with that. It's not triggering it in the same way. It's triggering it, but it's not sounding this big alarm. It's just, okay, we need to deal with this. How do we do it? The language we use, you know, we go into catastrophic language. I'm starving. Well, you're not really, are you? Starving means you're about to die because of lack of food. You're a bit peckish, you know. I'm dying when you're unwell. Well, you're not really, you've got a cold. It's all those things. There's so many different parts to it that you can educate people on, and there's so many ways. Stress builds up, never builds up because of one thing. There's loads and loads and loads and loads and loads of little things, and we contribute it without knowing. We contribute to it all the time. So if you can get any insight in that, that lowers it. When you are kind of dealing with loads of stuff, and believe you me, I've had, you know, I've had CEOs of big organizations who are like, this stuff doesn't work. I've got, you know, do you understand the pressure I've got? And I'm like, yeah, I do. I get it, but just try this, just have a go. And, you know, every single time they come back and say, you know what, yeah, that actually did work. And they come back and you know, and then they're like, no, I realize now that I was, because what you have to remember is we don't get stressed because of something that's happening. We get stressed, our stress response is triggered because of what we think about the thing that's happening, how we've interpreted it. So if we can learn to really understand our mindset and challenge the way that we think about things, the way that we view things, you know, if, you know, take sorry, I know I'm going on a bit, but if you take a really simple example, there's a dog in a room. Yeah. Some people love dogs, some people hate dogs. If you've got two people in there, one person will see that dog and they'll be like, oh my God, that's amazing. And they'll get this rush of oxytocin. Yeah, me too. I've got a dog. In fact, I'm surprised he hasn't come in. You get this rush of oxytocin and they love it. And they're like, oh my God, that's amazing. The other person in the room, same dog, same room, nothing's different. The dog is not reacting any differently. But that person, if in their head, dog equals they might bite me, or they're scared of it, or I was always told that this was a bad thing, or they might have had a bad experience when they were younger, their stress response is kicking off. It's because of what they think that dog means. It's how they've interpreted what that dog is. We don't get stressed because of actual situations. We get stressed of how we've interpreted it. And so if we can, but in order to question and challenge that thought that's triggered it, we need access to our prefrontal cortex, which we can't do when our body is in fight or flight. So you have to calm the body first, and then you can go into, okay, right, let's look into this. Let's resolve it. And we need time to do that. We need time and space. And sometimes, particularly when you're saying, I haven't got time, the one thing that we don't do is we first of all, we sacrifice sleep, which we should never do. But B, we think, well, I can't take time out to have a half-hour lunch break. No, I've got too much to do. But actually, if you did that, you'd probably come back and you'd find you'd get the same work done and it'd be better quality. Do you know the story of Henry Ford? Did I tell
I
you
know
the story?
pieces of it. He's often referred to in self-help books.
Yeah. So obviously he was a bit of a philanthropist, really, in his heyday, he was like, right, he had this vision. He wanted every household to have a car, but he had to find a way to do it. Basically increase car production without really increasing staff, because he didn't have the money to do it until everyone had started buying cars. So and at the time in that industrial area, the standard working day was Monday to Saturday. Sunday was the day of rest. So he decided, right, I'm going to give everyone the weekend off. It was an experiment initially. He decided he's going to give everyone the weekend off. He told them, you're all having Saturday and Sunday off. I'm not knocking your pay. You're still going to get paid the same amount, but the expectation is productivity will increase. It was so successful that all other industries followed suit, because people were getting proper rest for 2 days. And that's what gave us the weekend. I mean, ironically, some people misquote him now and say, oh, he's the reason why we work 5 days a week. Well, yeah, actually, because we used to work 6 days a week beforehand. They make out like it's a bad thing. It's not. What he did was amazing. But of course, nowadays we have a need. We've got so many more things that we're subjected to that potentially trigger our stress response. We're always online. We don't leave then you clock out at 5 o'clock. That's it. You're done. Nowadays, who clocks off at 5 o'clock and then they never look at their emails again? They don't. They go home, or they'll watch TV, we're subjected to other stresses. Or family life is probably a little bit more stressful these days. Economy, health, all those kind of things. The sort of expectations to keep up with the Joneses or whatever it might be.
We're consuming all day long. All day long.
So we never get that respite that our brains need. It needs time to sit, and so many people. I mean, I'm my daughter's 21 now, but the idea of just sitting with nothing to do, she's like, oh, what? No, I can't do that. But actually, that's what your brain needs. It needs time to just sit and be and think, or to go and walk in nature without listening to a podcast, or without, just being in nature and enjoying it, because it gives your brain a chance to process, just like our cells need time to rejuvenate and all that kind of stuff and rebuild. So does our brain, but we never give it that chance.
Wow, conscious of time, so we're going to wrap this up soon. But one thing you mentioned in there in particular, Nicky, was nobody does well when they're in this completely like stressed out, red mist has descended. What about that person who goes, yeah, but everything you've said is valid, Nicky. However, I am one of those people that wears stress as a badge, and for me, I'm someone who when everything's on fire and everyone runs away, I run to the fire. I'm someone who I'd love to be on like where the stock exchange, a floor like that with people shouting and screaming. That's me at my best. And when I've got 1,000,001 jobs to do, and when if I haven't got deadlines that are kind of everything that was needed yesterday, then I will just sit and do nothing. And
Yep.
I thrive on intensity.
Mhm.
So therefore, stress is my greatest power. What would you say to them?
Brilliant. Great. Use it, but make sure you get your rest from it as well. Absolutely use it. That, you've got adrenaline junkies, you've got people that do. There is no benchmark for a level of cortisol that's optimum for everybody, because some people really do thrive off stress. That's the purpose of it. It was devised to give us this superpower. As I say, your internal superhero, brilliant. Use it. That's you using it correctly, as long as you're not on 24/7. Because if you're always on, or you're doing even 8 hours a day is too much at that level. Use it when you need to use it, thrive on it, get the deadline, do that. But then notice, I guarantee if you start looking at your pattern, there's a bit of crash and burn afterwards, or you feel exhausted or whatever else. Emotionally, you're probably a real pain in the ass at that time when you're when everyone's like, oh God, here he goes, he's on one again, or she. But recognize, yeah, fine. If you work best that, great. Know that about yourself. Understand I need deadlines, I need excitement, all that kind of stuff, which is true. We can be our most motivated when we're in our stress response. But then make sure you take the break. One of the most I did meet no, I think he was HR president of a PLC. And he worked like that. He loved it. He loved the thrill of it. He was always buzzing. He was always working at his best when he was working to a deadline, or there's a big thing going on. But oh my God, he took 3 holidays a year, 3 decent holidays a year, and he completely switched off every single time. So he'd got into a really good, on weekends as well. I think he was very strict with his boundaries. Yes, he would absolutely go all out. This is a Usain Bolt way of working. I'm gonna go out there and I'm gonna give 150%, and I need to beat all these other people on this track, but then I'm gonna go and I'm gonna make sure I look after myself in between time. So yeah, absolutely, it's great if you can do that, but make sure that, because if you keep doing it, there will come a point where you crash and burn, and it will be so catastrophic at that point. It take you a long time to come back. Whereas if you just take a little bit of care now, you can keep doing that for as long as you live.
I agree entirely. I was reading a statistic last week about coaching, and it was actually a statistic about the predictability of heart attacks in men
Yeah.
of sort of middle to later life aged men, and they were saying that the chances of having a heart attack in later life are significantly reduced for the men who have done the work on their own psyche in their 20s. So what do I mean by that? The men who have worked on self-awareness and worked through things that make them feel uncomfortable, and kind of maybe work with a coach, have those conversations to find out what's getting in their way, what beliefs are holding them back, all of kind of the really difficult stuff. The men that have done that in maybe their earlier life, 20s and 30s, probably have a lower risk
Yep.
of a cardiac event in their
Yep.
later life. And it comes back to, I say to people, okay, you're thriving and life is fantastic for you. Come along, let's have a conversation to make sure it stays like that. And let's reach the next level. Let's not wait until something's gone wrong before we intervene, because then it might be too late, too little, too late.
And this is a big thing. I'm very much for and one of the key messages I try and instill in all of my clients, whether they're organizations or individuals, is you need to be proactive, not reactive. Reactive, yes, we can work with, but proactive. Stress, every single, like heart disease, strokes, even cancers, dementia, Alzheimer's, all those things, there's a strong correlation with being stressed in your younger years. And like you say, sort of 25 through to sort of 40s, 50s, if you've spent a biggest chunk of that just living in this state of stress, which we can probably do at that age, but then all of a sudden it starts to hit you differently. But if you've left it until your 50s to deal with it, you know, it's a much harder journey to come back to, and there is a chance you've put yourself at higher risk of developing these conditions, which of course, if they happen, it's then too late. So, you know, they quite often call it, is it the third well, I mean, it's the third diabetes. You know, it impacts everything because cortisol goes through all of your system. We just, you know, it was never, this was an evolutionary part of our brain that kind of came about in caveman days to help us overcome predators and survive, you know, and we're still acting as if that's what it's doing, but it's not. What, you know, we're triggering for a deadline, or for, you know, we're triggering it for the smallest of things sometimes. You know, your hair goes wrong, or, you know, you picked up the wrong shoes, or, you know, someone's not put the toilet seat down, or whatever it might be. So many things are triggering our stress response now, and that's not the purpose of them. That's not the purpose of it. And we need to learn about it, and learn how can we challenge the thoughts around it, how can we make sure that it's not negatively impacting us both today, but also, you know, 20 years from now.
Wow. Well, Nicky, I normally wait until after the recording stopped to tell my guests how fabulous they are, but you know, I just want to say, while we're still rolling, I think the work that you're doing is incredible. I feel there's not a single question I could ask you about stress that will throw you off and you won't have a brilliant response for. When I first met you, to say that you impressed me with your knowledge of your craft and your passion is the understatement of the century. You blew me away with this knowledge and this information about stress that I just had no idea about. I'm sure anyone listening, a bit like me, feels that the episode has just flown by, and I'm sure they've got a thirst to hear and find out more. And there are probably a lot of people listening thinking, "God, we could do with Nicky in my organization yesterday." So if for all the people who are listening and who want to find out more and want to get in touch and consume some of your awesome content, which I really recommend doing, where can they find you and how can they get in touch?
So I do have a website, thestressspecialist.com. I'm on Facebook and Instagram, although that's probably more personal. Well, not personal, but it's less corporate stuff on Facebook and Instagram, under the Stress Specialist. I'm on LinkedIn under Nicky Lloyd Graeme and the Stress Specialist. So yeah, just come and find me.
We'll put some links down below in the chat. So I'd love to know, are there any parting words that you would give to someone who's listening? And maybe if they just took one thing away from today's conversation, having heard all of this new stuff about stress that they've never heard of before, having all this new awareness, is there any key takeaway that you'd give to our listeners of my show?
The mantra that I often tell my clients to work with is me first. Always me first. You know, if you're struggling and whatever else, before you start taking on any tasks, any challenges, any problems, think, okay, how do I put myself in the best state possible before I do that? Me first. What is it that I need? Do I need a glass of water? Do I need a good night's sleep? Do I need to talk to someone? Do I need to reach out for help? You know, do I just need to take a deep breath? You know, do I need 5 minutes? You know, big or small, but it's me first, always me first. And that sounds terribly selfish, but actually, you know, in order for you to be at the very best, you have to prioritize yourself first. You have to. So
Me
yeah.
first. Yeah, absolutely. I've heard that advice given in different ways. You know, you get on a plane and they say you have to put your oxygen mask on first before you can help someone else. Other people say you can't pour from an empty cup. My old therapist used to say, "Not my circus, not my monkeys." It all boils down to if you sacrifice yourself in the process of helping others, then you know there's nothing left to give.
Nothing left. If you can't, I know this is something that I think Stephen Bartlett talks about. If your health underpins everything. There's, you know, whether you're a parent, whether you're a friend, whether you're a colleague, a manager of a business, whatever it is you're doing, if you don't have your health, you can't do any of that. But you have to prioritize your health first. And this falls under the category of health. You have to look after your mental and physical well-being in order to be able to achieve anything. And that includes enjoying life. You can't even do that if your health is not right. So it makes sense to me. Just me first every single time.
Absolutely. And I have a family member who has almost paid the ultimate price not too long ago from, neglecting themselves and not, heeding the warnings and, kind of pushing it back down, bottling it all up, and who absolutely does listen to the show and would be saying, yes, I second this and can confirm, it's not worth it. It's better to do something proactively than wait until there is a huge problem, because then it can just take so long to sort out.
We do it all the time. We brush our teeth every day. How many people wait until, teeth are falling out or people are backing away because we've got bad breath? We don't. We do it every day. So just add some other things into your day-to-day life, and they don't have to be big, but just make sure they're non-negotiable, that you add in. Very few people would miss brushing their teeth every day.
Exactly.
We need to do the same for our mind.
Exactly. It's just like with your car. If you start getting a load of engine management lights coming all on the dashboard, you've got smoke coming out the sides and oil all leaking out underneath. The best thing you can probably do is take the car into the shop and get it looked at. But we do it for our car, so why wouldn't we do it for ourselves?
And equally, if you're using that analogy, when all the engine lights have come up and the smoke's coming up, it's a massive bill. There's a big problem. But if you go and get your car serviced every year, then you don't end up with that massive bill, because it never gets to that point.
I love it. So on that refreshingly automotive note, for all of my motoring fans who do listen as well, shout out to them. And Nicky, thank you so much for coming on the show. I feel like we could just go all day. The time has flown by, and I cannot wait to see where your work is going to take you next. And I am coming to see your TED Talk when you're on the stage. And hopefully you can hand the mic over to me.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, David.
The Solo Coach Podcast.